Hi, everyone, and a massive welcome to the next episode here on InfoSec Live of the CISO Experience. My name's Simon Linstead, the host and founder of the InfoSec Live community, and I'm super excited to be talking with another of our industry's leaders today. This time it's Paul Love to share his journey and talk about the challenges and the successes that he's seen in our industry to date. But before we begin, if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We want to make these events as interactive as possible. So again, make sure you drop any questions you may have in the chat. And for those who don't know, who are the InfoSec Live community? We're an independent social network community of 3,000 cyber professionals sharing best ideas and practice. And we've been creating content on YouTube now for just under a year. I'm very excited to announce that we have over 2,000 subscribers and over 5,000 hours of content viewed now. So a massive thank you to everyone in our amazing community for your support. And you should, if I get my breath back, also see some new and exciting ways to support the YouTube community. You've got the ability to purchase super stickers in the chat if you want your question bumped up to the top. And there's 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you may be able to. But a special thank you to our latest 2 members, Aaron Lax and KevTech. Your support is very much appreciated. And again, a massive thank you to all of you for engaging. And whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. And for us to keep bringing you valuable and informative content on the CISO Experience, I want to say a big thank you to the support of our existing sponsor, Bramfit Technology Labs, who've made these events possible. There'll be a link to check them out in the description on the channel. But without further ado, just get my breath back. A little bit about our next guest. Next guest is Paul Love, who's the Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer of Co-op Financial Services in the United States. He brings over 25 years in information security, privacy, risk management, financial services, and technology experience to the show. Excuse me, and he's held information security positions with Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, Freddie Mac, Ernst Young, Microsoft, Schlumberger, Ally Financial, Fifth Third Bank, and the US Marine Corps. He also holds a master's, Masters of Science in Network Security, has authored and co-authored 9 books on information security in Unix and Linux, including the Institute of Internal Auditors Global Technology Audit Guide on Information Security Governance. He's also been the technical editor of 10 books on Linux and Unix, holds multiple certifications in information security, privacy, and technology. And I think you will agree, this is going to be epic. Let's bring him on. Hey, Paul, massive welcome.
Hi. Wow, that was very impressive. I thank you so much for the kind introduction.
No, you didn't see me doing this, getting my breath back for the 30 seconds when the sticker came on. You've got such an impressive background, Paul. I mean, I don't think I've done you a service completely with the intro. So before we dig in, I suppose, to the Q&A, could you just tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, all that stuff that, all those credentials and things, I always look at that as part of my journey for learning because I'm in continuous learning mode, right? And the way I got started was I'll date myself a little bit. I had an Atari 65XE back in the 80s. And, I took a class in 6th grade on computer programming on an Atari 800. And, I built my first program using spaghetti code. So I'm not saying I'm a coder by any way. I mean, I know how to use go-tos, but I know how to make really bad code. But I created some code, and then that got me interested in security. And actually my house where I lived as a kid got broken into, right? And I didn't like that feeling of, somebody violating our space. So my love of computers and then, not wanting to see other people feel like they had been violated, from a security perspective, really got me fascinated with security. So I joined the Marine Corps, worked in security there, and just continued to build my love for this industry that you never know everything. And, I'm always learning something new. There's always a lot of stuff I don't know about. And that kind of just feeds my curiosity. So, I love security and everything about it just because it's such an interesting field. And I hope others are able to participate in that as well, right? It feels like sometimes we have unnatural barriers to getting people in the field.
Do you know it? You hear that a lot, and I think there are barriers. It's definitely not barriers that are put in place by the leaders like yourself, though, Paul, because all the conversations we have on this show is all about the importance of, not just certifications, but those transferable skills, those soft skills, all the things that we hear. But when it comes to the kind of recruitment process, and I don't want to steal your thunder because I know you've got an F-Sides podcast coming out on this very topic next week, but there is some gatekeeping going on. But from being a new entrant into the industry myself, 19 months, I think I've been working in here now. I've never known an industry like it for people being prepared to give back. It's like no other.
Well, and that's the good thing. The unfortunate bad thing is there's artificial barriers put into place, I think, sometimes unintentionally. And it's because sometimes in security, like for instance, I've been in security for a while, right? Since the 90s professionally, and before then, amateur. And it didn't seem like there was as many requirements to get in the field. Basically, if I was breathing, I was like, hey, you're a Unix admin. You might know something about security. You're now our security person too, right? It's like, okay, I'll do that. Whereas now, it feels like when I look at job descriptions, there's so many requirements. And, the thing I try to share with people and to, like one of my sons got into security, right? It's like, hey, you don't have to have all these fancy credentials. Most security people and most CISOs and so forth are just looking for people who are passionate and want to learn about technology. And if you show that you have that passion, right, that's there. Now, some people equate that to certifications or a degree. I actually think the people who, some of the smartest people in security that I've worked with didn't have any type of IT background. One was a fine arts major, one of the best security people I've ever met in my life, fine arts major. And then another one was majored in orchestra, right, on how to be, and it was just amazing. And and the reason they could do that was because they were able to take abstract concepts and make them into solid physical things that you could execute on. But
well, this leans really heavily onto my normal pet gripe that I talk about a lot, which is our education system as a whole. And I mean, I mentioned to you before we were live on air, I've got 6 children. I've got some in different areas, different ages and stages of education. I've got one who's left school. And the one thing that we don't get taught anymore, unless you pay out extortionate private school fees, perhaps, is critical thinking. We're taught to pass tests, Paul.
Yeah, I know. No, I agree with that. And that's why, the people who are passionate, the people who go and do CTFs on their own and show like, hey, while I was working this job in sales, right, I went and, did 5 CTFs. I didn't place, but I learned more about it. Those are the people I really like. And the people that I want to, really bring into the field, because you can teach technical concepts.
You can,
the ability to communicate effectively and passion are, it's really hard to teach passion, right? I don't think you can do it, and hard to teach the ability to communicate. So I always tell people, take the risk and try to get into the field, even if you don't have a lot of experience, because it's such a great field and there's so many opportunities to learn.
There is, and I think a lot of the negativity we see, though, I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit, because you hit the nail on the head with the word passion. You need a passion to be in this industry. And I've said this 100 times before. There are far easier ways to make money than the cybersecurity industry if money is what you want. But you have to have that inbuilt drive and curiosity and passion for the space, I think, to succeed in it. And a lot of the negative comments you see perhaps online are from people who've maybe paid for a boot camp, haven't quite got the 100 grand a year job in the 6 weeks that they were hoping for, and decided to badmouth the industry. I've seen loads of people on a positive side break into the industry with very little experience. One guy last year in his 50s ran barbershops for 20 years, good business acumen. He came in at a fairly high level GRC position, consultancy advisory position, after doing 12 months of study, because we had all those skills to transition over with him, which were, as you rightly said, those soft skills that are so important. There is a question from Rachel here. I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but I'll bring it up in case there's anything else you want to add, Paul. Why is it so difficult to get a cybersecurity role despite having experience and certifications?
I think there are 2 parts to it. One is, I'll talk to the easier part, is that even with a bunch of certifications and experience, if you're not able to tell the story of what you can bring to an organization in your resume, which, Simon, thanks for mentioning our podcast in a couple of weeks, because that is one of the things we talk about, is telling the story. If your resume doesn't tell the story and is just a list of bullet points, it's very hard to distinguish yourself from other people. So I think that's one thing, is being able to effectively tell the story of who you are and what you bring is really important. And resumes, unfortunately, are the only way to do that, and for most people. So the other way is to network and reach out to CISOs. I had somebody, a very junior person, actually just in college, reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking to connect on LinkedIn so that when I post stuff, it gets groups of people. Do you mind?" And they wrote a personal note to me saying, "Hey, I appreciate if you can do that." I did that, right? It's because I want to help people, and anybody listening today, feel free to link into me because I want to help.
I'm going to use
people.
this
So
opportunity to get your profile. Here we go. Sorry, Paul.
Oh
Carry
yeah,
on.
sorry. I'm not trying to get more connections, but just as an example of a great way, because the other thing I think is it's the part that we put on ourselves. So let me tell you. So you mentioned my qualifications, right? Theoretically, my qualifications, the certifications, and so forth. Like I think I have like 20 something certifications, and a master's degree. But when I walk into a room, I sometimes feel like I'm not qualified enough to talk about stuff, right? So imposter syndrome, right? And even my, being in the field so long, I walk in with imposter syndrome sometimes and feel like, oh, can I really talk about Active Directory? I don't really know a lot, but now I'm much more confident in myself because I've been in the field, that I know I don't have to know everything. I just have to know how to ask questions. And I actually, tell people, I actually ask them like I pretend like I know nothing. Now, the reason I say that is because I think when people are applying, they may not apply for all the roles that they might be great at, right? And take that risk. Sorry, I got some dogs in the background. I think everyone who lived through COVID.
It's normally my children screaming, Paul. Don't worry.
Okay. But I think it's limitations we place on ourselves. So if you see a role, go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You're not closing a door, because there's people I've talked to in the past who, they were just great. They're passionate. They want to do it, but they said, I don't have enough certifications, right? Like I need to get Security Plus, or I need to go finish my master's. And I tell the person, no, don't worry about that. Just go apply. And you know what? Even if you're applying, go post stuff on LinkedIn. Your voice matters. Even if all you're doing is saying, "Hey, I applied for a job," or "Hey, what's this mean in security?" Like, get your voice out there, because hearing new voices and asking questions is really important, and that exposes you to a larger group of people and creates opportunities for you. So I would say, the answer to that question is two things, right? We got to improve on the security side, the leadership side. But the other one is, if you're interested in it, go for it. Take the risk. That's how I got a couple of my jobs. I applied to one job. I was like, there's zero chance I'm going to get this, zero. And I got in, and they hired me immediately. I got up all the way to the corporate vice president, who they said never happens on the same day. And, they basically hired me that day. And I was totally shocked, because I'm like, I'm not qualified for this. So give it a try.
I think I completely agree with that, and I think it was Rachel who asked the question. Rachel, based on what Paul's just said, I read a research paper about 2 months ago about gender bias when applying for jobs, and I don't know if you've read anything similar, Paul, but us cocky, arrogant men are sometimes more likely to apply for a job where we think we've only got 50% of the skills asked for, whereas females tend to be more honest about it and think, well, there's no way, unless I've got 70% of what they're asking for that I'm going to apply for the job. So again, I don't think it is just a gender bias, but it could be a personality bias as well, especially if you've been sending out resume after resume, had rejection after rejection, you get to the point where you're losing your confidence. It's important to get that back, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And I will say I did see the same study. That's and part of the reason why I'm in the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council, one of the leaders in our organization, is because I want to see what can I do to help, right? And if you're a security leader and you're not part of your diversity program, I would say get in there immediately, because you're going to hear a lot of different perspectives that helps you be a better leader and bring in better security people with more diversity in thinking, because you really need that in security. But the confidence thing, let me tell you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Paul. No, you go.
I was going to say the confidence thing. I totally had that happen to me, by the way, for everyone on this. I was at a very high profile job, very, very high profile, where everything I did was very visible, even to the public. And we were succeeding in all of our objectives. but I was miserable, and it's not because it was because I did not fit with the culture of the organization. The organization was great. It was just not a good cultural fit for me, and that doesn't make
Yeah.
them bad or me bad. It just wasn't a good
No.
fit. It got to the point where I was like, I need to leave the security field. I'm not a good leader. I'm not good at security, guy. I'm miserable, right? Luckily, I went and took a job that was a little bit lower, less stressful right after that one, and it rebuilt up. Like, okay, wait, that was just a cultural fit issue. That wasn't because I'm a bad security person. And I rebuilt and accelerated my career from them. So you're going to have those instances. You just have to know that it's probably not you. It's probably an aspect of the environment or so forth, that you need to consider and really evaluate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going back to your point there, Rachel, I think it was Rachel, Scott from Click Armor, you've made a point about using LinkedIn perhaps to demonstrate what you've learned. If you can tell stories that particularly highlight your understanding of risk terminology such as threats, assets, and vulnerabilities, you'll get noticed. And I think completely agree, Scott. And also, if you can demonstrate, you see a lot on LinkedIn of people posting, I've passed, Sec Plus, passed Net Plus, or I'm top 3%, try hack me, or whatever it might be. Whilst that's amazing, I don't actually think recruiters and employers really care. Well,
Yeah.
I'm being brutally honest here. What they want to see is what you've learned and how you can apply that to the role that you're looking for. Do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, and posting, things like that is great. Like, hey, I got the top 2%, or I would say even just post, hey, just completed a CTF, and I didn't realize you could do this, right? And just talking about your experience, the more visibility you get out there, the better, and the
Yeah.
more that you show the humility, right? Because I think I saw a comment earlier about humility. 100% agree, right? Like when you were describing my, at the beginning, I was like, oh, because you'll find a lot of the CISOs that are in security, people that are doing the day to day, are tend to be very humble, right? And I know by saying
Yes.
that I'm not being humble, but they tend to be very humble. But the security stars, if you're trying to compare yourself to somebody who's listed as a security star, right, air quote, or one of the talking heads of security, don't, because they're just people too. And it takes all kinds of people to work in the field, and don't feel like you need to compare yourself to anybody. Because early in my career, somebody gave me a very good piece of advice. I walked into my manager's office, said, I wasn't a vice president at that point, and I said, I need to be a vice president. They're like, okay, so if we promoted you to vice president, what next? I said, well, then I need to be an SVP. It's like a senior vice president. It's like, okay, what's after that? Oh, wait a minute, I am focused on the wrong thing. And then that totally changed my life. And I was like, wait a minute, I actually need to think about, what do I want to do? What am I passionate about? And that's when I stopped worrying about it. And that's when,
Yeah.
really weirdly, my career got better, right? I started to get the progression that I needed. So
I've got this smug smile on my face because it's like you're describing my journey in different terms there. I mean, I was on different focuses on different things, but it was shiny things and money for me. And
yeah, yeah,
I achieved all that, and I was
yeah.
still absolutely miserable. And I was working in an industry that I had no interest in, helping rich people get richer, no real satisfaction. And it wasn't until, I mean, I wanted to become a technical tester in the
Mhm.
industry. Clearly, if I'd have done what I'm telling everyone I speak to now to do first, which is have a look at your own personality, look at your strengths
Mhm.
before you start going in. However, what I've ended up finding out I really enjoy doing is this.
Yeah.
It's, getting the chance to speak to people like yourself and learn from your experiences and journeys. And going back to the humbleness, you think I've been doing cold outreach to get people like yourself on this show.
Mhm.
And cold outreach on LinkedIn is something I've never done before and always said that I wouldn't. And you
Yeah.
look at kind of conversion rates. Well, we've got a 50% conversion rate from who I've sent out invites to come back. That is a reflection of how humble people are in the industry.
Yeah, and plus, your messaging resonated because it was personal, right? It was like, hey, let's chat, like, and and that's how I would recommend that. If you want to break into the field, reach out to the manager and to an organization that you're interested in, and just say, hey, I'm just learning the field. I've done a couple CTFs. I'd love to chat, and just chat with them, like, hey, what was your journey? And have a human conversation with them, and then that's going to open a lot of doors for you.
It is, and I think going back to what you said before about not comparing yourself to anyone else,
Mhm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some people, especially leadership positions in the industry, who've been in tech for like 20, 25 years, and it's become, I suppose, a natural progression. But everyone else I speak to who hasn't been in the industry that long has got completely different backgrounds. And there was a question that came up earlier. Where is that? Because it relates to your service. Let me see if I can find that. It's me trying to do two things at once here. Scrolling on the left.
I can't do it, so I'm glad that you're able to do it.
It's Yuri. Thank you very much. Service in U.S. Marine Corps. Did it give you some push to become a CISO or not? Good question.
Um, at first it did, right? And that was because the military, any military, is very hierarchical, and it's about your title, right? The more title you have, the more influence you have in an organization. And I always
Yeah,
realized that I wanted to be able to influence the direction of an organization. So when I was in the Marine Corps, I thought, okay, to do that, I have to have a SVP title, right? A senior
yeah,
vice president title or some type of title to be influential in an organization. And that kind of that followed me until I had that conversation I just mentioned with that manager who said, well, Paul, what's next? Right. It's like, oh, I can influence organizationally without having a fancy title. And, that kind of shook me out of I have to have the CISO title. And then eventually I became a CISO because, I wasn't chasing it as hard. I was really enjoying the journey and
yeah.
showing my passion. And and now I applied for a CISO role. Don't get me wrong. It's not like someone just said, hey, well, you're going to be a CISO, but, it finally just kind of made sense. Like, oh, okay, the next step is to influence. But, going back to your comparison thing, wherever you are in your journey in security is okay to be there, right? Because sometimes I look at the LinkedIn like, oh, this person got an award, or this person is now the CISO of a top 50, top Fortune 50 company and so forth. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, am I behind? Am I back?
No,
Like, am I
you
not
just
doing it?
haven't paid for the awards, Paul.
Yeah, or and I actually saw a LinkedIn post, but it's like it's natural to compare yourself. That's why I don't like social media as much. But
Yeah.
I compared myself and I get down a little bit. Then I think, wait a minute, am I happy with what I'm doing? I love my job. I love the company I work with. It's like, so what am I worried about, right? So don't comparing yourself to others is just
I
definitely
think
a pathway
the
to
sooner
disappointment.
you work out in your life that it's a fool's game worrying about what other people think of you all the time, the happier you will be, Paul, I think is my comment
Absolutely.
there.
So I
Just want
think
to
I
dive
answered
in
the
the
question.
chat.
I hope I did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Just want to jump in
Okay.
the chat quickly just to say hi to Chris Foulon. Thanks for jumping in, Chris. Really appreciate it. Jonathan Kipping, it seems like his your stories resonated with him quite a lot. We've got Nika in the audience as well. Nika is part of our scholarship cohort. We've got 7 community members all being put through a fully paid scholarship at the moment, Paul. We launched it 3 weeks ago, and we're building out bespoke pathways for each one. So we've spent a bit of time on personality assessment. Last week we had a CISO focus with some CISOs coming in for chats. This week we've got some more CISOs and some red team members coming in before the cohorts start to try and make the mind up on what direction of career they want to go in. And Nika put, I always wonder at what point would I be good enough to take a cybersecurity role. Nika, you're one of the most passionate individuals I've met in my last 2 years in the industry. So I would say pretty much
Today.
now, really, back to
Yeah.
that.
Today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
today. And we've got a question here from Deloney, V8 Motorsports. Miss my V8. Any advice on ways to assess risk and or how to prioritize which vulnerabilities to address first?
So that's a very, very big question. So I'm going to answer it
It is.
generically, but hopefully not corporately, right? Like I don't want to give you
Yeah.
a non-answer. So, the way that I assess risk is I create our requirements, our information security standards, and then I pull from those requirements and then pull throughout the organization and say, hey, are you application A, are you meeting the requirements that are applicable to you? Application B, right? And so for infrastructure, Unix systems, are you meeting the requirements? I gather all that data together, determine organizationally, are we meeting the information security standards, which are the codified version of our risk tolerance, right? Because if your
Sure.
organization said, hey, we want to be compliant with all laws and protect our company, we pull a bunch of different regulations and so forth. But being compliant isn't being secure. So I'm not saying that either, right? You have to add some things in there. So
You've got
that's kind of how
a few caveats here, Paul, I think.
yeah,
Is
well,
there?
I'm going to throw because you have to contextualize everything. Otherwise it could be misunderstood. But that's how
Absolutely.
to understand to assess the risk. Now, the prioritization. it really depends on the organization and how you're set up. The easiest way, and I know somebody's going to come back and say, Paul, that you didn't think about X, Y, Z, so please forgive me. I'm answering very generically, but I always look at it and say, when I talk to people, especially when I'm new in an organization, it's like, okay, tell me about all the vulnerabilities that could be exploited outside of our organization, right? What has the biggest attack surface? Like what could the most people attack us from? And then I say, okay, those are the things we need to address first. Or actually I say, what's exposed outside and how's it rated, right? Was it critical, high, medium, or low? And does it have confidential information like personally identifiable information, credit card, health information, whatnot? I say that's our highest priority stuff we need to fix. Then I go to the next layer, which, okay, externally facing, but doesn't have all that stuff in it, right? And then you go into the internal systems and so forth. So not a great answer because there's multiple ways to do it. But if you're looking for what's the very basic way to do it, the outside stuff, because that's where the most people could attack you with, personal information that's rated. You can use CVE, whatever you want if you're just starting out. Because I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. You don't have to have massive mathematical formulas. Just if starting somewhere, even if you start with 10% of where you want to be, that's 10% better than where you were, right? So get started and do that. And that action orientation, by the way, is what CISOs, in my opinion, love, is people who are action oriented, who say, let's solve the problem, but I'm going to incrementally solve it instead of waiting a year to solve everything and then having to redesign it. So I didn't answer the question fully, but hope, yeah.
I think you answered it very diplomatically and very well, Paul. Is the honest answer. Do you look for people who are going to question as well? So I don't mean question in an awkward way, but I think we had a guest on the other day and we were talking about. Oh no, it wasn't. It was with our cohort. We had a CISO in who was trying to manage their expectations on the type of work they could get first. And he was talking about different colors of work. I think he was talking about red work, green work, and gold work, I think was the terminology.
Oh, that sounds
red
like
work
a model, right? Like green
yeah,
dollar.
I think so. Yeah, the red work was, menial, repetitive tasks that you don't really understand what value they're doing at all. And he was saying how important it is to know why you're doing something and make sure that you understand the value in what you're doing.
Yeah, so the way I would look at that, there's two questions you had in there. The first one is about do I look for people who challenge me? Absolutely. And if you are working for somebody who doesn't want you to challenge, get out. Leave, because you're not going to grow as a person and you're not going to achieve really anything in your career. For instance, I hire people that actively argue with me. Now there has to be like a disagree and commit point. But one of the people I hired was a person who failed me on an audit. And it was an auditor of mine, and failed me on an audit, wrote me all kinds of audit findings, before I left the organization. We ended up becoming good friends. He was one of the best men at my wedding. I had two. He became one of my best men, became one of my best friends too. And I hired him at two other companies because he would go and argue effectively and ensure that and when I say argue, like if I'm about to walk into a meeting and say, all of our systems are X, right? And he comes and says, well, Paul, you're not giving the full story. All of our systems are X and Y. That was a great thing because he saved me from, creating a problem for myself. And, I always look for people who challenge me, because I'd rather have them challenge me than me, make a mistake somewhere. So that's the first part. Now, the second part of your question, sorry, what was the second? I lost it there.
You can't expect me to remember what that was.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember too now. But it was really good. But basically, hire people that disagree with you, and and as a leader, you have to get rid of your thinking that you're always going to be right or that you always know everything. Yeah, I think constructively argue. I totally agree with that.
Splodge, you're spot on. I was then about to bring your comments up actually, because this is a bit of motivation for people who are trying to break in. Splodge said, I'd like to encourage people out there. I took a job with a small company as tech support for software, and I've now been entered into the cybersecurity team and also product ownership. So sometimes it's just getting that foot on the ladder, isn't it? I think, Paul.
Yeah, and that's how it started for me. I mean, when I got out of the Marine Corps, my first job was with a company. I was a Unix system administrator, and then they said we need somebody to kind of centralize and think about security. I popped in there, and now look, I've built a career out of that. So
I think that the one thing I'd say when it comes down to people, especially in teams, and I go back to when I used to run a lot of meetings back in the day when I had staff, and it was always the quietest person in the room
yeah.
who I'd want to know what they'd been thinking at the end. The person who gets overlooked, they tend to be the ones who give you the most valuable insights. And I think there's a great book actually by Christian Espinosa, another CISO, called The Smartest Person in the Room. And I think as soon as you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, aren't you, Paul?
Oh, yeah. Let me just say that if you're a CISO and
Not that that's
everyone's
ever happened to me.
yeah, no, if everyone's agreeing with you, you should be very scared, right? Because that means
Yeah.
either they don't feel comfortable telling you what's going on, or they don't care, right? And if I always assume I don't know as much as the other people in the room, and if everyone's agreeing with me, I really get worried.
Yeah. Either means they're not listening or they don't
Yeah,
care. Yeah.
yeah.
One of the two. Question here from Scott. Do you find tabletop exercises to be valuable for incident response? If so, can you share any examples? Good question, Scott.
Yeah, no, for me, absolutely, because and this is a kind of a military thing, or at least I took it from the military. Is the more you practice, the better you become. You want your activities to be muscle memory. So for incident response, we do tabletops very frequently because we want people. If we take away the unknown, it makes it just very normal on how we're going to react to incidents, because incidents are very highly stressful situations. So
Yeah.
going through the thing saying, every time we'll go in and I'll say, okay, where do you find the documentation? And if somebody's like, oh, I don't remember, I don't get mad at them, because the tabletop is where you want to find that stuff, right? It's like, okay, great.
Absolutely.
Let's go and make sure that, here's where you go do it. And if they forget multiple times, it's like, okay, right, we're going to get it there. And how do we make it better? And tabletops are exceptionally important. I would actually recommend you doing tabletops on your incident response at least monthly, right? And I've had instances where I did it weekly just to remove the unknown, especially when you're delegating.
Yeah.
Because I tell my team, when you're in the room, you're the CISO, right? You have to behave like a CISO if I'm not there, because you represent the team and you have that authority to make decisions. So I need to remove the fear from making decisions in incident response. But my team also has to know that even if they make the wrong decision, as long as it was ethical, I'm not going to come down on them, right? Because I always tell my team, if you make a decision, I disagree with you, I'm going to back you up. We may talk about it later and say, hey, I disagree. I think we should have gone this route. I won't do it in front of others. But if you do it with the best intentions of the organization, great, because you're there to protect the organization, not the CISO, right? And if you
Yeah.
always think about that, I'm always going to support your decision making.
That's a great point. Just building out from that, then, we see a lot in this industry of finger pointing at end users, don't we?
Oh
You know,
yeah, yeah.
it's their end users' fault, and then that brings me on to staff awareness training and the
Mhm.
disasters that we see of that being implemented sometimes. And you made a great point about not publicly shaming or pulling people up on it at the time, but it seems to be the way a lot of companies deal with their staff awareness training for cybersecurity is naming and shaming those who don't do very well, which surely isn't the best approach, is it?
Yeah, I mean, fear will motivate people to a certain point, but really understanding will motivate them far longer with less effort. So when we build our security awareness program, now, to be clear, you have to have some consequences if someone clicks on every single phishing
Of
email that
course.
comes through, right? You have to have something. But in general, what I focus our security awareness programs on are, hey, I tell my team is, let's make this about them and protecting their families. Let's show them how to protect their family from phishing, give them tips on how to make sure they're not connecting to bad Wi-Fi, right? Really make it personal, and
Yeah.
then come in and say, oh, and by the way, this also helps the company, and here's how you can help the company. So I make it about them protecting themselves and their family, and then expand it to the company. And I find it really sticks when you take that approach, because now it becomes very personal. And I've had people come to me and say, Paul, my grandmother was looking at an email. She now knows I'm the security person in our family, and I told her not to click it. I appreciate the program you created. It's like, that's the best thing I could ever hear, right?
Do
Because
you know
now I know
what?
they're bringing that behavior into work too. I love it. Yeah.
My wife has become the go-to cybersecurity expert on the school playground, Paul, for very
Yeah.
similar,
Yeah.
very
And that's what you
similar.
want.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, so people asking questions about dodgy text messages they get through, and someone got their phone hacked through Instagram, and it's all very exciting on the school playground. I just want to jump in the chat really quickly.
Sure.
Carey Cheerson is in the house. Carey has passed, everyone, his A+ first module exam today. So I just want to take a second, Carey. Well done, because I
Oh,
know this has been a hard road for you. You've had lots of complicating factors going on in your life, like we all do, but you've knuckled down and you've passed that exam today. So massive, massive congratulations to you, Carey. Really, really well done. And right, back to the questions. We've got a couple in there. Yuri, you've got another good one. Thanks for tuning in again, Yuri. When you hire a person, what are the top 3 things you want to see in a candidate?
Passion, right? First of all, and let me tell you how I look for that, so that that's more than just a word, right? So,
Yes, please.
and I'll tell you those top 3 things. So, passion is the first one, and I look for that by, how did you get in the field? What do you do outside of the required stuff? Like, what are you doing on your own to learn? So, for instance, if you're doing CTFs on your own, or hey, I read a book on hacking, and here's what I got out of it, right? Or if you have a bunch of LinkedIn posts that says, hey, here's my journey in security. Right now, I'm seeing that you're passionate about security, and it's not just a job. The second thing I would look for is your ability to solve problems in an incremental way. Right. So, and I did this early in my career, and I look back, it's like, oh, I wish I could have not done this. But, when I would go work on a problem, I'd be so focused on trying to impress my leaders that I would create this big, massive solution. By the time I presented it to them, they look at me like, what are you talking about? And it would be like, okay, a year has passed, Paul, and your solution makes no sense because of this, and this has changed. So I felt stupid, right? So, being able to chunk a problem and very quickly say, okay, you know what, let me use a configuration management database, which is a fancy name for an inventory of all your systems, right? So if someone says you need to have a configuration management database, e.g. an inventory of all your systems, how would you approach that? Well, some people would go through and say, okay, I need to go do a big scan of the network. I need to do X, Y, Z, all these things. And I would just say, do a simple in-map scan, right?
Yeah.
And document that. And that's the start, right? And that's where you start. Even if you're in a small org, go write down on a piece of, of printer paper, hey, these are the 6 systems we have in the operating system. That's a great start, because now I'm seeing, okay, this person can incrementally think and solve a problem and expand and make it better. So that's the second thing. And that would be an example of what I would ask, or kind of what I would look for. The third thing is to be able to communicate a story effectively and contextualize. And what I mean by that is, and again, these are all things that I've had problems with in my career, that I've done wrong, and I wish I could go back. But being able to tell that story effectively. So, for instance, if I say, "Oh, we have 10,000 vulnerabilities," right? That sounds bad, but I'm not really telling you the story, right? So, what's the story? Well, the story could be, we have 10,000 vulnerabilities, but that's across 5,000 systems, and they're all low rated. So, it's, and now that you've given me that additional information, it's not as big of a deal, right? As opposed to if you just say that number, it could be. And the analogy I use with my team is, it's like, and I published something on LinkedIn about this not long ago, is about contextualization. Is yelling fire without context doesn't really tell you anything, right? So if the fire's in the fireplace, okay, great, that's where it's supposed to be. If it's on the couch, that's a problem, right? So you definitely go solve that, and being able to tell that story is super important.
Absolutely. I was just sorry, my eye just got dragged up to the chat there. I see that Jennifer's dropped in. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for tuning in. Does anyone know of any entry-level cybersecurity internships or positions available? The quick answer off the top of my head is no. However, if you come along and join the InfoSec Live community, if you haven't already, I will drop the invite in the chat. It's a free community, and I know for a fact over the next week or two, there are going to be some new positions being added in there for the UK and the US. And I know that some of them are entry-level positions. So have a look at that. And also, actually, saying that I don't know of anyone, Valor Cybersecurity I believe they're based in Norfolk, Virginia. I think the last time I looked, they were looking for an intern in the cybersecurity area. So perhaps have a reach out to them. Greg Tomczyk is the CEO and Jeff Fields is the COO, Jennifer. So maybe give them a go.
Can I
I
add
noticed
something to Jennifer? Maybe a tip, if you don't mind.
please. No, please.
Yeah, Jennifer, what I would say is, that's great that you're asking and you're attending things like that. That's exactly what you want to be doing. The other thing I'd say is get on social media networks, and I'm going to say LinkedIn because it's the easiest, but there's others out there, right? Get on LinkedIn and first of all, try to connect to as many people as you can, even if it's just a connection. You don't have to have a long, conversation. Just say, hey, I'm new to the field. I want to break into the field. I'm looking to connect to other security professionals. Can I link into you? Right. And you'll see that you'll get a lot of yeses. So once you do that, that amplifies your voice. Right. So when you post things now, it's not just seen by your direct connections, but it's often seen by their connections. Right.
Yeah.
So I have, thousands of connections because I've been in for 20 years on LinkedIn. Now all of my connections are going to see that. Now you can start to post things, but also you can pose questions because we're all looking for interns at certain points of the year. Maybe right now it's not the time, but if you put out there after you connect to a group of people, say, hey, please consider me for internships. Here's kind of what I love to do. I've been doing 5 CTFs every month and X and Y, a couple little notes about yourself. You'll probably get a lot of feedback and a lot of people reaching out to you versus you having to go and apply.
Yeah, I completely agree. Carey, while you're jumping back in there, I think I just saw that you might have just bought a couple of books to learn Linux. Paul, seeing as you've written 9 or 10, any suggestions on books for
Well, I'm
Carey?
not going to
The
say mine are
basics?
older. Yeah, I wrote mine in the late '90s. So if a couple of them I think were good, but it's you don't go. By the way, so writing the books sounds it's not glamorous, right? You don't go writing books for money. The whole
No.
reason actually that I did it was because it forced me to really hone my craft and really make sure that I understood the concepts I was discussing. And I just like helping people. And so buy any book you want, but there's a couple out there that I know that are good. So I'm not going to
I
recommend my
have
own
got
book.
I've got a copy kicking around here of Linux for Dummies, Carey. If that's not offensive, I will put that in the post for you, my friend. I'm more than happy to help with that. And I'm going to drop this link in because we've ended up focusing on people breaking into the industry and the hiring practice when we weren't really going to talk about that all show. However, next week, if you check this link out, fsides.com, this is Paul and Jason Loomis's podcast. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
believe, do you want to tell the audience a bit about what you're releasing next week?
Yeah, so we're actually talking to a recruiter about how to tell the story, and the things we're talking about here is tell the story. Asking them what makes a good recruiter. Because, by the way, you shouldn't feel like your relationship with the recruiter is they have all the power, right?
No.
And no good recruiter is going to treat you like that. Unfortunately, we all face that sometimes. But the recruiter is working for you. So if the recruiter is not, communicating with you effectively, not communicating on your timeline, go find another recruiter, right? It's almost like buying a home, right? If the person selling you your home, coordinating is not your realtor, is not communicating with you, you're not going to keep using them. You're going to go with somebody else. So treat your recruiters the same way. So we're really talking about what do recruiters look for? What are some good resumes that he has seen? Just a really good conversation about helping people tell the story and break into the field.
Let me spin this one round then. What does a good recruiter look like?
Well, so in my experience, a good recruiter is one who will keep a relationship with you over the years. So how do you do that when you're first starting out? Well, you can't, right? But the thing I would say is the first things to look for are they communicating with you? Did they spend time to try to understand what you care about and what your resume is about? Or are they just copy and pasting your resume and throwing it out and doing the shotgun approach of giving it to everyone in the world?
Yeah.
You could do that just as easily. Now you just
It will
introduced it.
it will fail just as easily for you as it
Oh
will
yeah.
for them. Yeah.
Well, now you've just introduced somebody else who wants to get money, for referring you when you could have just done it and saved it, because sometimes the companies don't want to pay that, right? So,
Yeah.
if that's what they're doing, that's not a good recruiter. A good recruiter is one who will spend time with you, talk to you, work through like, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? Okay, here's 5 roles. What do you think? Right? Like have conversations with you, like almost like a mentor would.
Yeah.
and spend the time. And
And I think
unfortunately,
it's important for them to understand the roles that they're trying to get filled as well. And I think
oh
from
yeah,
what I've seen with some, there doesn't seem to be a terribly great or deep level of understanding of what the role actually entails. So
Mhm.
you've got the problem of being given a list of long qualifications to perhaps a recruiter who has no previous experience in cybersecurity apart from a couple of conferences and a few buzzwords, then trying to match people up with roles. It seems to be
That's a pet peeve, by the way, because I get people sending me LinkedIn messages. This is why I don't reply to all LinkedIn messages. So if you're linking into me here, just mention that it was from the CISO experience. But I get a ton of messages where people are saying, "Hey, we have a operations manager role for you, or we have a SOC analyst." It's like, well, did you actually look at my resume and see that that's not the career level I'm at right now? That you don't want to pay for me being a SOC analyst. So,
Well, this is
and
just
those are the
poor
recruiters to avoid.
marketing though, isn't it? It's poor
Yeah.
marketing, and you think I get approached every day by companies with their, sales outreach on LinkedIn, mostly asking me if I want help with cybersecurity. And
Yeah.
all it takes is a quick look at the profile that will probably tell you the answer is going to be a no, because I've got people that I know. So what a waste of time from their point of view as well.
Yeah. And unfortunately, technology only makes a bad process bad faster. And
I
if
love
they have a
that.
bad process for getting information out and just hitting as many people as possible, technology is going to accelerate the badness. So, I never pay attention to those because, one, I love my job. I'm not looking for anything, but it's like,
Yeah.
if you're doing this to me, right, how many people are you sending it to that don't have experience in the field and don't realize that this is a bad recruiter? This is not what the level of service you should expect in our field
I
or
think
any
the
field,
comment the
really.
comment I love the most from you was the recruiter should be like a mentor. And I think
Yeah,
that's such a great way to put it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I look for. There's recruiters that I talked to for 20 years, and and even the ones I just meet, we go have a conversation. Right before I got this job, I had a great conversation with the recruiter. We talked for a bit. I explained what I was looking for. They understood what I was looking for and said, "Yeah, this seems like a good match." And that was a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Kerry's just said he's Googled a list of your books, Paul, to look at. Thanks, Kerry. Let me know how you
Oh,
get on
there's
with
no.
those.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. But
Old
yeah,
ones are the best. Old ones are the best, Paul.
yeah,
So look, we've
some of
got
them
we've
are out
got
of date.
about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask you one question, quite a generic one, and that is, what do you see as the biggest challenge for our industry in the next 5 years? If you can nail down one, that is. If not, multiple's fine.
As an industry,
Yeah.
I would say diversity. We need more diversity in our field, and diversity only amplifies your creativity. And I'm a strong advocate. Now, earlier in my career, I wasn't, right. I didn't think it was important. I didn't understand it, and luckily, I grew into a better person. I think where I
Yeah.
started to see, especially when I joined the Marine Corps and saw, hey, diversity. Different types of thinking are going to bring in people or bring in thoughts that you may never have considered. And
And
in
this is
this
the point,
field,
Paul. This is the point. You just said it there. Diversity of thought, which
yeah,
can mean diversity of race, color, creed,
absolutely.
sexuality, and all these. But that
Yeah.
isn't what diversity really means, is it?
Yeah. I mean, and that's diversity in all aspects. So a lot of some of it's based off of, the physical aspects, right? Your race, so forth. Some of it, the non-physical. And I would just say it's so much better for us as a field when we have diverse thinkers. Some of the best security leaders. One who's my mentor is a woman, and she didn't come from a security background, and she's the orchestral, right, the conductor,
Yeah.
and like the most amazing leader. But I hear about the journey she had to go through and how horrible it was just because she was a woman. And it's like, well, we have to move past that and have to make diversity part of what we do and bring in people who think differently because the attackers think differently. And
Yeah.
if we are all thinking the same way or we all look the same or have the same experiences, the attackers are going to just use a different route that we hadn't thought of. So I would say diversity, and that's why I care so much about DE&I at our company, and I'm part of the leader because I want to make sure I'm bringing in diverse people.
I think it's super important. And the next question, then I'll spin another one from in the chat from Yuri, a very important one. How do you rest from the job, or do you rest from the job?
Well, I do. I collect coins and I work out and do stuff at home. But the thing that I find is, luckily, I chose a job that I really love. So for me, the best rest, the best vacation is when I'm in training. Right now, I'm doing an OSCP, Offensive Security Certified
Oh,
Professional, right? The pen tester. I'm
yeah.
doing a class. I don't know if I'm going to get the certification. I don't know if I'm good enough.
I
Um,
wasn't.
Oh yeah, but it's to me it's interesting because if
It
I'm
is.
always continuous learning. So for me to be able to learn, it really allows me to do the fun stuff. Why I got into security and doing training. But other than that, you do have to have things outside. So I have my family and things like that. But if you love what you do, it's never feels like a job. I just love everything about security. Even the bad days are like, hey, this is still fun.
That's when you learn the most. Now, going back to the important thing I picked up on there, are we talking just US coins or is it coins in general?
Oh, all coins.
All
I
coins.
love old medieval coins, especially from the UK.
Do you
So
know
I collect. Oh, I have
you
gold nobles, and
you need
you
to
know.
come to our house. So
Oh,
we live in on top of an old Saxon village. So we live
oh.
in east of
Actually, my
England.
wife lived in London for 3 years, or for I'm sorry, 6 months, not 3 years. 6 months, and we just were out there a couple of years ago. We're going to go back. We'll have to connect because I was looking for
Definitely.
coin shops while I was out there. It's like, oh, I need to buy some coins.
Well,
So,
I'll speak to you afterwards because I've actually got loads of coins that I've just found going through my mum's stuff. So I'll speak to you about them. But what we've also got is an 1100-year-old church down the road from us
oh
and loads of
wow,
previous settlements. So I'm going to invest in a metal detector at some
oh my
point.
god,
I know it's
that
exciting,
would
isn't
be
it?
my
I'll
dream.
send you some pictures of where we are because
We
you'd
would go
absolutely
castle
love it.
hunting when we went to Scotland and England. I mean, I love just visiting old castles. So yes, that's another thing. Like I collect medieval English coins primarily, especially from the Elizabethan age, but even going back even further, Roman times. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to have other things that you do as well.
It was that. I mean, it's ironic, isn't it? The Roman coins, because it was the Roman coins that kind of was the end of their empire, wasn't it?
Oh yeah,
Tagging current or tagging the value of goods away from gold, which unfortunately we seem to have done a few decades ago as well. So hopefully
uh,
history won't repeat itself there, Paul.
let's hope, or at least I hope it takes a very long time. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's just you coin collecting so much fun. I didn't know you collected coins. We'll have to chat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My father was a very keen philatelist, so he's got
Ah,
stamps is his thing.
yeah,
He's got
yeah.
boxes and boxes of stamps. Anyway, we're digressing away. So talk to me about last question. What's your biggest success in your time in the industry?
My biggest success was realizing it's actually going to be interesting. I wasn't expecting that question. So I'd say my biggest success is recognizing that I didn't need to know everything. And I know that sounds maybe cliche or not, but
No.
once I hit the point of I don't have to walk in a room and know everything, I got the imposter syndrome left me. I got more confidence with saying I don't know. Before I didn't feel like I could say I don't know. Now I say it all the time, and I don't feel like it diminishes me.
Yeah.
So once I learned that, that was my biggest personal success. My biggest external success, right, was being able to help an organization achieve of just a nearly impossible goal. I won't say it just because, but it
Sure.
was
Yeah.
a very tough goal that cost a lot of money, and being able to knock out things very simply when another group had failed was just that felt really good to me personally. Just helping to make something complex that failed before, helping to solve it and fix it in a simple way where people are like, oh, that wasn't that hard. That to me always feels like a great success.
Yeah. I love both points. I think the first one resonates the most, where
Yeah.
you don't need to know everything and you can't be
No,
an expert on everything. And I think
absolutely.
a true leader is one, who values the strength that he's got in his team around him. And that's the mistake I made when I had my own business. I was blinded by ego and arrogance and thought I could do everything myself, which
But you learn,
hard
and
lesson to learn. But
yeah, but the fact that you're having the conversation now shows you have the ability to grow, which I think you should walk away saying, hey, that's something I was able to grow from, and I think it's going to make you far more successful because you had that experience.
well, I think again it goes back to the start of the conversation on what is success, doesn't it? I mean, for me,
Yeah,
success for a long time was shiny stuff when really what success is a mindset. And it
yeah,
took me a long time to work that out. If I wake up every day content and happy and in a positive mind, that's success.
Agreed. 100%.
I
Right.
don't need the V8, although I do miss the sound of the V8, whoever that was in the
For
chat.
sure, they're fun. But if you have a poor base, all the money and the cool stuff only amplifies the badness. If you have a good base, the extra stuff just amplifies the goodness.
You know
So
what?
have a good base.
A very wise man said that same statement to me 4 years ago. Money isn't the problem. Money's an amplifier, Simon,
Yeah.
is what he said to me. And if you're in a bad place, having a lot of money is not necessarily a good,
No,
thing
'cause
to
it
have.
traps you. Yeah, it
It
traps you
does.
to the building where you don't feel like you can make a change. Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah. Does absolutely. Well, look, there's me rambling again at the end there, but Paul, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. And everyone who's jumped in the chat, again, you've blown me away with the amount of you who've jumped in with the questions and the engagement. It really, really does mean a lot. And these whole episodes are meant to be about sharing, our journeys, our best ideas and best practice. And I'm sure that you've all got lots out of this today. Final thing I will say, we are looking for a new sponsor. So massive thanks to Bramford for being our sponsor for the last 2 series. But if anyone out there is looking to support the community and would like to sponsor this amazing show, please do reach out to me. Paul, sales pitch done from my point of view. Any final words for the audience before we wrap things up?
No, hey, thank you to everybody who joined and their insightful questions, because I actually get a lot out of the questions that people ask, and I hope that I can help you. And but when you get into the field, help others. Right, that's the best thing you can do.
Absolutely, Paul. Thanks ever so much, and make sure everyone you tune in next week. Is it the 15th?
Yes,
The podcast
yes,
is coming out. See,
yes.
I remembered.
F-sides.
15th.
Yep.
The link's there. F-sides podcast. Everyone, thanks so much, Paul. Look forward to speaking to you about coins very soon.
Yes, thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.